Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone. This is Bram for Unit 6. So, for this week, instead of going through rights, religion, identity, I'm just going to talk about the authors themselves and like how they end up contributing to these three terms, just not in any particular order. So, starting off with Anderson and Blackburn, so they really emphasized uh, the topic of the Kulturkampf. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, which really was just like a surge in German nationalism when you get down to it. Like the Catholic Church was starting to have less autonomy in mid to late 19th century. They had to like really assimilate with the Prussian state. There were no more individual constitutions. They just had to either join the German national constitution or dissipate. Right? They were to disappear if they could not assimilate, and of course they would be persecuted for that. So what ends up happening is the Catholic Church is sort of forced to rally behind the center party, like block vote, because they couldn't really have their own Catholic party anymore because they were getting, flanked by not only like German nationalists and Protestants, but also German liberals that were essentially their voting records were being associated with Bismarck and the Prussian state. Liberals, in particular, German liberals of this time, they did not have a enormous amount of support. So what they instead decide to do is, they find out that, well, if we vote with Bismarck and the Prussian state, and if we vote with the government, then we will have more power, even if it means we have to turn our back on Catholics, which is really, really, really frustrating. I would assume for Catholics, especially for Catholics that did end up voting liberal at one point. But now let's move on to Sperber's article. Sperber talks about the growth of an industrial class in the Ruhr Basin. And what I liked about this one is that it doesn't just talk about how there's like religious conflicts. There's always religious conflicts in European history, especially between the Protestants and the Catholics. But there's also this large class conflict, as there should be in any city, any industrial area. So what I liked about this was that Catholics were the working class, whereas Protestants were the elite. So that made it easier for me to not just sympathize but empathize with the Catholic majority, because I'm also a part of the working class here in the United States, and I do not associate with myself with the elites, and I do not vote in their best interest. I vote in favor of the working class. So that was really a way for me to empathize with this group of people, and how they end up, flocking to the center party once again. Like Catholics, that seemed like their only refugee at that point after the German unification wars. That's really all they had, because if they couldn't create their own party, they figured, okay, well, the best way for us to maintain any of our best interests is to, put all of our support into the center party that's still powerful. Okay, but lastly, with Gross's article. So after Germany obtains Alsace-Lorraine, and they've had their, unification wars with against France and Austria and so forth, I noticed that liberals of that time, German liberals of the late 19th century, they began to identify with the nation of Germany rather than with Catholics. Okay, so the Catholic rights seemed to get thrown out the window in this case, so that Germany or Germans could focus on Germany first, right? And this is actually a very sad just piece of history that I've read, to find out that German liberals went against their best interests basically, and they end up losing much of the support in the future because they figure the only way they can get any support or any widespread popularity is if they agree with the nationalistic governments.